Hello, hello, hello. It's late on Sunday here in the UK. Well, how did you get on with the eclipse? What a challenge. We're all supposed to have learned something really important from it, and I must admit I did, because it was yesterday that I had tremendous realisation as to what the last 30 years have been about. That's quite important, I think, because I've been through absolute hell. I left my husband 30 years ago without anything. I left with nothing whatsoever, except a sideboard, I think, and a chair or something, into a rented flat. Students above, the flat below had no hot water. In fact, it had cold, had no hot water, no heating. I left in March, the coldest day of the year, and I just stood there with all this rented furniture around me and no heat. I just couldn't believe I'd done it. It was a real challenge. Well, I had a breakdown afterwards, but I did it. There was a little tiny stove in the kitchen, and the hot water was heated with a huge boiler that was vacated at the end of the kitchen. There was no shower. There was some cooking facilities, I think, but no shower. So I was really cold and miserable and whatever. No good lighting the fire. First of all, there were bricks in the chimney, which I had to get removed by somebody. So we had a smoke-filled room. There was no good heating hot water because this boiler that was huge would have heated all the flats upstairs. So you can imagine if I'd got hot water going, all the students would be, running baths with glee. So I had to get myself a can of gas heater to keep myself warm. And well, it was noisy. The bedroom was off the hallway with tiled floor, Victorian tiles. Very old fashioned, very old flat, and the students kept me awake most of the night with the smells of their curries or their phone calls or their drugs. I was invited to a drug party once and I didn't know. I sat there at 2 o'clock in the morning with the cigarettes were being passed around. I thought, well, this is nice, and I slept so well afterwards. So when my daughter many years later took me to a student party, I was worried about the drug scene. I didn't tell her I'd been there and done that. So anyway, that's how my 30 years leaving my husband from a warm, cosy semi thrust into this world of flatland, which is a totally different story. Well, it is in any country, isn't it? Students and hard-ups and, living rough and so forth. It's not a pleasurable experience, and I hadn't got any money. I left without anything, without any money. So I was scrabbling for on the social services for quite a long time until the house was sold. And then, of course, once I got that money, they stopped everything, and it didn't last 2 minutes. So I stayed in this flat for about 3 years actually, and it was too long because in those days, I think even now, you can't rent for longer than 3 or 4 months, then you have to get out. So I was lucky to have that. Well, it wasn't a sacred space really, but it was safe, and I was still in the same city. Although I didn't keep in touch with. Well, I didn't have friends then, not really. I didn't keep in touch. Nobody came to rescue me. My daughter was at uni, and my parents, well, they were. My dad used to call in now and then, bless him, when I was really ill, and I was really ill with glandular fever. He came by with some pills and potions. He was a pharmacist, and that was the end really. Because once I'd got that illness, I never really got over it. And I had some very strange experiences, which perhaps not, I don't know, perhaps I ought to go into them another time, psychic experiences, I don't know, because I really want to talk about survival. I will tell you one though, because you might find it interesting. There was a little coloured girl, a little African girl, she came to my door one day, I didn't know who she was, and she said, can you help me? She said, I've been attacked by a witch doctor. I'm not really laughing, it's just the story is so bizarre, and I just got onto this flat. There was no heat, no hot water, and I was like exhausted, and she said, can you help me? I've heard that you could help. Well, I was very naive. I still am really, I suppose, but more naive in those days. And I said, yes, you can come in. And I don't know what I did. I did something with the whole aura, I think, and she said the witch doctor had put the spell in her foot, and I did something. Well, after she'd gone, I felt this almighty presence. It had shot through my aura, and whether I still had it for a while or not, I don't know, but I had one difficult task to get rid of it. So that was my first kind of experience of being in this flat, where the down and outs would find me. And there are some very peculiar stories that I won't go into now of people that did find me thinking I was the angel of the north, you know. And I was on my own, of course, very vulnerable. And this is the time I had that Christmas. Do you remember I told you about the Christmas when the gardener from the Franciscan Friary came to stay, and I had to lock my bedroom door because I wasn't quite sure what he was going to do. I know I'm jumping around a lot here because I'm trying to get the message across that survival. I just say today, yesterday, whenever, I understood what it's all about because I was cold. I lived in a very warm semi in a very sensible area, and suddenly I was flung into this flatland with no heat, no hot water, and I had to get 3 kettles to boil all these kettles up to wash up and wash my hair. The shower was right at the bottom of the kitchen, a little few drops of cold water. What I used to do in the daytime was to drive back to my suburban house when nobody was in. I still had the key, and I used to have a shower, a bath, and do the washing and stuff like that because I had no facilities. Nobody knows what it's like, and I was 40 something then, so I was a bit old to sort of start again really, and I wasn't leaving for anybody. So I have written a book called Woman Alone, which is I'm trying to get published, and it is surviving on your own in a man's world is very difficult. And I hadn't got the experience, I hadn't got the earthly experience, because there was no computers in those days, no mobile phones. It was very raw living, and I had to move around because although I was renting, you have to keep moving. I owe short hold tenancies every 3 months. You have to move, so the money soon ran out. You can imagine. I've had 10 homes in my last 30 years. Every 2 years I've had to move, probably more than that even. And I think the most difficult survival was in my, not this one, I'm in a bungalow now. This is the first time I've really been warm and safe, to be honest. I've had 2 homes before this, and the one before that was a farm cottage. I've mentioned the farm cottage before because it was really my delight, but it was bare survival. I've just watched a video actually on the internet about a man that went camping, and he had a little stove. It was a dear little stove in his tent, and I was fascinated by it. I thought, that's what I've done in a very similar way, not outdoors but indoors. Survival with no money. I hadn't got any money then, and just trying to survive from day to day. And it's a real challenge. You know, it is a challenge. I had my car, fortunately, but the cottage, it was a very old farm cottage. Yes, it was a farm cottage, very small, very basic, dreadful decor, and again, a lot of it was borrowed. The flooring was appalling. I did have cooking facilities, which I haven't always had, and a little shed at the back with a coal was, and I had a coal fire. That was my godsend. Absolute. There was hardly any heating in this cottage. It was just back night storage heaters, what they called. They're never really very warm, so I had a coal fire. That was my saving grace and my companion. I think I've mentioned this before. So I had to have coal delivered and logs delivered, and I had to scrabble around. I used to go out in the countryside finding sticks, kindling they call it, sticks and paper, start the fire off, you know. Once it got going it was amazing, but of course in the morning you had to clear it all out, all the ashes, and it wasn't any, and you had to get on your knees. I couldn't do it now. I couldn't light a fire now. I couldn't get down there or get up again. I had a settee by the side of it, and all the arm, it got very, very blackened because I kept leaning up, putting my hands on the settee to get up off the floor when I'd made the fire. So the fire was my saviour, but of course it was in a very icy place, this cottage. It was near a farm. It was on a farm actually. It was a farm cottage, and when we had heavy snow, and it was the year, I think, gosh, 2017, 16, I can't remember exactly. It was going back some time, when we had really, really heavy snow and we were locked in. It was just a farm track outside. You couldn't drive down it to get onto the main road, which also was very snowed up. So you were literally locked in for several days, so sometimes a week or two. I'm just going to check the time, darling. I'm just going to get carried away, as you know. And so this was the biggest challenge, and the freezing cold, to go out into the back garden, into the backyard. It was only a little yard, no garden. Into the shed to chop up sticks. I had an axe, and I had to chop these sticks up. If I couldn't buy them or get them in the woods, and they were always very damp, I had to chop them up in order to make a fire. So it was a real challenge to survive, and And the fact that you're locked in is quite frightening. So I had to be very, very careful to always have stocks in. I always had, this is just to say to people, you know, you do need to be careful, cause especially these days, always keeping a stock in. I was born during the war, the Second World War. My mother always had a cupboard full of stuff because you never know when you're going to run out of food or not be able to get it. You've got to queue. She had to queue for everything. There were no supermarkets. And I got that habit ingrained in me to always keep you know, a carton of long life milk, 2 or 3 of those are very handy to keep in, dried milk, lots of flour, eggs if you can. Keep stuff in so you can make things if you really are stuck. With the fire, of course, I was always fairly safe. I could put a kettle on if I needed to, or cook something, toast or something like that. But I did have a cooker then. I haven't had since, but I did have one then. So it's a question of being safe and always keeping a stock of food in that you can rely on if you haven't got anything for at least a week, and making sure you keep warm. You see these were electric storage heaters, and if they fail, which they did sometimes, I had only the fire to rely on. And coal and logs, they're all very expensive, you know. It's expensive to run a fire. So I was literally waking up to a cold, well, it wasn't too cold in the morning because the night storage heaters were on all night, but during the day by 4 o'clock it was freezing. So I had to go out into the yard, into the shed with my axe, chop up sticks and coal just to make the fire to survive. And I always managed. I was there 8 years actually, and in the end the landlord chucked me out because it was a very cheap rent, and he knew it was a cheap rent. He wanted me out so he could get it done up, put somebody else in at twice the price, you know. So I had to find somewhere else to live, which is another story. But that was I suppose the initial leaving my husband and surviving. It was a shock to my system. I did have not a huge breakdown, but I know I wasn't well. I really wasn't well. Glandular fever, and I was there for 3 years. Then I moved into this other thing. No, I didn't. I can't remember. This cottage, or I think 3 or 4 moves on. So all the house moving on my own, packing up, unpacking, you know what it's like. And financially, of course, it took all my resources. So this cottage, I must mention the windows, they were sash windows. You know, I expect some of you know what sash windows you've got. They sort of called from the side, and they were very, very old, and of course drafts. It was so drafty that what I had to do was to buy some polythene or cellophane, whatever you call it, and hang it onto seal it all down the sides, and it would blow out with the wind that used to come through these windows, the sash windows, blow this polythene out with the high wind, the high gales, and keeping warm was a nightmare. I just daren't move in front of the fire, but I did survive it, and here I am telling a tale 3 or 4 house moves on. But I had to say this because that video triggered me off, yes, and I finally realised what it's all about. Getting in touch with the earth. I was always very spiritual, always, you know, off the planet most of the time. And this was teaching me to really grasp the earth energy, to really survive with, like the North American Indians do, working with the earth, you know, logs, coal, fire. It was all very earthing for me, and it was a shock to my system, as you could imagine, on my own at that age, having been warm and cosy, although having been born in the Second World War. I think I should go. I could go on about this, couldn't I? Having been born in the Second World War, we did have nothing. We had nothing. No, not much food. The whole saga is another story, so I'll have to go into that another day. Just to say, this was to teach me everyone should learn to survive. Everyone should have the abilities to survive without anything. Well, at least they can manage with, not to have cold, warm, everything, but to learn to survive. And I do feel quite triumphant. I do feel I've achieved something really, really great, and it has put me in touch with the fact I can survive, and I can, and the earth is my friend, and I will always find the means of doing so. So there we are, message for today. Okay, darlings, I'm going to go now. Take care of yourselves. God bless.